Okay, we're back. That was fun, huh, Rick? Um,
Yep.
disappeared in the middle of a really good rant. Um, and yeah, lost all connection from my primary streaming computer. And even though my capture computer was working just fine. Anyway, that's all technical stuff. You're probably not that interested. It was interesting though. From a technical perspective on this end, a problem I've never had to deal with, so gonna have to investigate it a little bit. But I wanted to come back on just real quick and talk with Rick about his show. We'll end the political discussion with the end of um, the other part of the episode, and we'll just talk real quick about your show. So tell us about Coloring Book. What and you can loop it back in with today's discussion if it's applicable. But tell us about Coloring Book when people can see it, where people can see it, what it's about.
Okay, so Coloring Book it's the first actual play that I've written. I've written a bunch of musicals. Musicals is what I usually write. But I actually wanted to write a straight play. Um, it tells the story of a guy named Will Edwards, who has a psychotic episode and is admitted as a psychiatric inpatient, and he undergoes a new form of art therapy called coloring book therapy, where he gets into a lot of the roots and the causes of his traumas and his reactions, um, and it helps him work through it. That's what it's about on the surface. What it's actually about is something called post-traumatic slave syndrome. Um, so often we can look at individuals and events that happen in their lives and trauma that they undergo, and it's very easy for us to understand how occurrences and traumas can lead to certain diagnoses in an individual. What doesn't happen is we don't look at how circumstances and traumas can be inflicted on a group of people, and then that group of people can wind up having ongoing reactions and interactions and consequences from those traumas. And so coloring book exists on two levels. It's an individual level, but it's also a collective level, and deals with how we as people deal with um, different things that happen in our lives collectively. That's a really short version of it. So we are going to be doing 3 staged readings for Juneteenth. Uh, June 15th, we're going to be doing a staged reading in Medford Lakes, New Jersey, which is the town where I live and do some of my artist activist work. So Medford Lakes, New Jersey on June 15th. And then June 19th, Juneteenth, and 20th, we're going to be at Fringe Arts, which is in Philly on Delaware Avenue. We're going to do 2 shows there. The easiest way to find the event's going to be listed on Facebook shortly and Instagram. I'm on Facebook and Instagram. If you reach out to RYKLEWIS, you can find me and get more specific information. But that's where it's going to happen, and that's what it's about. And the biggest thing that I'm hoping to do with it is to spur conversation, and to get people, particularly who are outside of the African American diaspora, um, to see and relate to things in a way that they can connect to, so that then there can be conversation.
Um, what do you hope to do with that conversation? Where do you hope people will go?
Um, I am convinced that you can't really begin to solve an issue until you understand the issue. I think that there are a lot of very well-meaning people who can understand, like before we were talking about things like dealing with poverty and dealing with crime and dealing with um, medical disenfranchisement and all of those sorts of things. And I think that there's a lot of people who can look at those situations um, academically and say, okay, those things are wrong, but there's not an emotional connection to them, and there's not a personal relationship to what all of that means and how it got to be. Um, and so my hope is that when people see this show, that they are able to understand another point of view in a way that impacts and hits them personally. Because I believe that once there's the academic and the emotional connection to things, that's when healing starts. That's when positive change can really begin to happen.
What? I mean, you put a lot of faith in people that I don't necessarily have there. I don't do do people positively change in your experience when they understand something?
I'll give you a great example. So in Medford Lakes, we've got a newly formed group called Humans for Humans. And the group was started when when the law came down in New Jersey, signed by the governor, that schools can't out their trans kids to their parents. When that was signed into law, a bunch of conservative and regressive parents lost their shit. And then the bias and the transphobia and homophobia came to the forefront. Um, Parents were going to the school board, going to the township saying, basically, we want to ignore this law. We want you to ignore this law, and we think that you should be telling parents, blah, 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 blah. And then out of that pushback, a group was born to foster uh, diversity, equity, inclusion, um, decency, that sort of thing. In working with this group and talking with this group, who admittedly are mostly a bunch of white suburban moms, as we begin to talk about all of the things that are under the umbrella of diversity and racial equality and those sorts of things, as the light began to go on, as they began to see and understand things outside of just their perspective, um, it absolutely positively affected their their ability and their motivation to strategize and be more inclusive to people that they don't understand. Um, I also think there's something to be said for holding up the mirror and getting people to look at things and getting people to, and I don't want to give away spoilers about how the show actually unfolds. But when people see certain things in certain lights and they have that aha moment, I think it absolutely changes the way they deal with people moving forward.
Um, how do we create that aha moment? How do we I mean, you've developed a small platform. You have an audience. You have people coming to see this writing. You have a goal here. How do we make that? I mean, it's a lot of effort. This is one of the problems I've always had with being an artist. It's a lot of effort to change a very few people. Maybe that shouldn't be such a concern. Like we're all as artists constantly saying, even if I affect one person, it's been worth it. But at the end of the day, sometimes we deal with issues that are so big that I want there to be a bigger platform, a bigger ability for people to, experience that change, to come to that understanding, to at least be exposed to the ability um, to think differently.
Okay, so I'm not going to lie. So there's a part of me. So we're going to invite a whole bunch of people to come see the readings. And I hope that lots and lots and lots of people come see the readings. And honestly, it'd be great if people come see the readings and then that turns into a full production. And then that full production takes off and then 10,000 people see it. That would be great. However, like I'm also working on a show called Kill Move Paradise at Camden, South Camden Theater. Very small house, um, relatively unheard of play by a relatively well-known now Philadelphia writer, James Iams. Um, so when I sat down and started working on that play, was shortly after I started planning to do the Juneteenth readings. And here's the thing, if I move the needle just a tick, and if Kill Move Paradise moves the needle just a tick, and if you do something that moves the needle just a tick, um, many hands make light work. So yes, we all want to have our statement. We all want to be Maya Angelou, right? We all want to be Langston Hughes. We all want to be, Nikki Giovanni, but we won't all be. We won't all be Nina Simone. But I've come to the conclusion, particularly with this show, um, it's a ripple in a pond kind of thing.
Sure.
Um, because if it's literally like I've thought about this. So if 5 people walk out of my show having a different understanding and a different level of commitment than they had when they walked in, then that's going to affect how they deal with people, which will then affect how they deal with people, then affect so a big part of my hope, and this is me generally as an artist, is that ripple effects become exponential down the road, even if, even if I don't sell 5,000 tickets. I mean, would I like to? Absolutely, because then that's a bigger set of ripples and that's a bigger swath of people. Um, but I also realize that there's me doing this, there's you doing this, there's, Damian Wallace is directing, like, there's enough of us who are doing this, and that's how the large change winds up happening. And the change is, I tell people all the time, I would rather be a black man in America now than 100 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, even for all the shit that we still have to deal with.
I,
So,
I'm much happier as a black man in America right now than my father ever was, or my grandfather.
right.
Um, and and they were very successful black men who paved the way for our ability to do what we do now. Like my grandfather served in the army and was, it gave exposure to white men in power to the intelligence and ability of black men.
Hmm.
The my father was also in the army, and by that point, it's 30 years later, and he, was in the officer corps. My grandfather was in the motor pool. Like the changes are vast, and now I'm an entrepreneur. I have multiple businesses. I'm able to communicate with people in the government and actually affect change. I guess that's what I know, that it's a long process, and it steps back and it moves forward and whatnot. I guess what kind of my frustration is, and my question is how do when does it get to a national support of this? When do we get to the point where enough people actually realize what's going on? that you can't win a political campaign without touching on these issues and understanding them.
Um, I, see, my first answer is a really unpleasant one. Because my first answer is, uh, we might get to that point, if we lose again.
Hmm.
Um, because
Because things will
and
regress so far that it will just it will become blatantly obvious.
right, like, and unfortunately, and I say this to people all the time, like one of my biggest fears is, you know, again, going back to our conversation before, you keep telling hungry people how great Bidenomics works, they just don't vote.
Right.
And like if we keep being the kind of tone deaf we are, and I say we, I mean like Democrats as a whole, because for all of my bitching about the DNC, I'm still a Democrat. I'm a Democratic politician. Like I'm a committee rep. It's what I do. Um, but when you still, like 2 days ago, a 15-year-old with a fake gun, cop pulls up. It's like Tamir Rice all over again. Cop pulls up, gets out of his car, shoots him. Fortunately, the kid lived, but it's like, isn't this the same shit we did with Tamir Rice like 15 years ago?
Right.
Um, and then, as long as, and I'll keep going back to this point, as long as we have Nancy Pelosi kneeling in kente cloth, but not actually doing anything about criminal justice reform, um, like after a while, people are going to be like, what's the fucking point? And then if enough people go, what's the fucking point? And, rich suburbanites talk about, well, democracy's on the ballot, choice is on the ballot. We're as divided as we've ever been. I'm like, where the fuck have you been for the last 40 years?
Where were
For the
you
last,
for 500 years?
right. I was going to say 40, 100, 250. Right. So I, I'm afraid, and it's weird because part of what I hope happens with this show, and again, I think it's going to be on a very small and local basis. Again, would I like this to go national? Great. But if I would, my hope is that people start to understand and see and start to get it, even if it's on a small local basis. Because I think the alternative is people can either get the story or they can continue as they have been. People will either look at the uncommitted vote in Michigan and realize, oh, this Gaza shit really is important to people, or they can keep on going, we're doing the best we can and we hear you, but then ignore them. So it's like people are either going to catch it or we're going to get our asses kicked. And then people are going to really get to see what happens when you're not real.
So and one of the things that this conversation brings to mind is this Kensington Coalition, Philadelphia politics, and the policies of Mayor Parker, which I'm just gonna briefly go over for the audience, just those that aren't paying attention. Uh, Mayor Parker has been working with a couple of local representatives for the districts that are hardest hit by the opioid epidemic and homelessness in general in Kensington and North Philly. Um, and they've, because of hyper local politics, been influenced to propose things that are quote unquote tough on crime, for lack of a better word. The common sense, quote unquote, is leading out against the proven methodologies of affecting change, because we never gave the proven methodologies of affecting change a chance because, again, of hyperlocal politics. So the Kenny administration was going to try this, try that, never really got off the ground because of hyperlocal politics and people having Protestantism in their core and in their understanding of the universe, as it were, and not understanding that people are just people. There's not people that are inherently bad, or people who are addicted to drugs aren't not seeking to improve themselves. People don't stop seeking a better life just because well, people never stop seeking a better life. Let's put it that way. Anything anybody ever does that you encounter, it's because they're seeking a better life. Is it wrong that they do it? Usually they're not doing it the right way, but uh anyway,
Not
the
the point.
huh?
That's not the point, though. Like the way they're going about it.
You're right.
Those
the
are the-
The point is not the way they're going about it. Seeking a release from your day to day by doing drugs isn't going to improve your life, but that's how they're trying to improve their lives. So the only way that's proven to combat this is to improve people's lives. And the common sense would say, no, you need to punish people and make it apparent that it's less good to do these things that you're doing. And the common sense is winning out right now in local Philadelphia politics. This is the problem with the whole thing to me, is that we never gave the progressive policies a chance, and now we're doing these regressive policies without the support networks. So the regressive policies might work. It might work if you create like a stick. It's the carrot and the stick method. You create a stick. The police and going to jail is the stick. The carrot is get off of drugs, get a job, get a house. The problem with the regressive policy making is we create the stick.
There's no carrot.
There's no carrot. There's no methodology for people that are homeless and on drugs in Kensington to get off drugs, get a house, and get a job. There's no way for them to fucking do that. I don't understand how hard it is to comprehend that they would all get a job, get a house, and get off drugs if they could.
Here's in asking, in saying that the regressive policies might work, I point you to Temple University's campus. So when you look at what gentrification did as far as the expansive growth of Temple University and the neighborhoods around it, and the money that comes in from both students from outside of Philadelphia, and developers and that sort of thing. But then you also look at the increase in violent crime in the area, and the lack and it's not just violent crime like stick-ups, it's violent crimes like shootouts with cops. That's a microcosm of what's going to happen when you just try to go to Kensington and sweep people up and throw them in jail. And then you don't actually deal with the problems and their roots and the causes and the impact. It cannot work. You cannot sanitize a very unsavory, and I use that term broadly, but an unsavory situation. You can't just clean up Kensington, because it's not just a matter of those bad people, and we take bad people and we put bad people in jail. There will be more addicts in the world. B, you can't lock up every drug dealer. C, none of those policies actually deal with the fundamental causes of why people are turning to drugs and why people are hooked on opioids, and why, Pfizer makes money hand over fist, and the more addicts wind up on the street, the more money Pfizer and SmithKline make, like, unless you deal with all of that shit, none of which these plans are dealing with, address, um, it can't work. It can't work long term. It can pretty things up for a minute, but ultimately not fixing the problem won't fix the problem.
Right. So, how do we get the people who decide what the policies are going to be to get the perspective to understand that that doesn't work? Because you and I know that doesn't work, and we try and tell people all the time that that doesn't work. Lots of people in addiction know that that doesn't work, but they're in addiction, so nobody's going to listen to them. Lots of people who study this for a living know that that doesn't work. Lots of people who have studied it their whole lifetimes know that that doesn't work. I do a show for the American Society of Criminology every year, and criminologists are literal scientific experts in crime and why it happens. And over the course of the last 10 years or so, they've all realized, yeah, that doesn't work. Just arresting people doesn't work. Tough on crime doesn't work. They've all
I think
written papers to say tough on crime doesn't. They've all written actual papers and done actual studies and proven what does work, which is dealing with the root causes and making a better life for people and making it so that people are able to feel comfortable enough to stop seeking an outlet, stop seeking a different. So it's always a breakdown in trust. It's a breakdown in trust of society, trust of the system. Stop seeking a new system and creating their own systems, and instead trust the system that exists. Um, how
I have a
Go ahead.
I have a firm belief in general that the arc of humanity trends upward.
Yes.
Um, a general philosophy of my life, the musical Pearly, most of my life philosophies can be found in that. And one of the songs is "The World is Coming to a Start," and it basically says all of the shit that you're seeing, all of the bad things that are going on, all of the crap that's hitting the fan is really the storm before tranquility. What we're seeing are the dying throes of apathy, that kind of thing. I think that's where we are. Like, people talk about, how incredibly racist people are, and how there's so much racial unrest and disconnection. And I'm like, it's always been there. But now, for the first time in history, over the last 35, 40 years, white male Protestant supremacy is really fighting for its life. Because the country's only going to get more brown, more femme, more queer, more atheist, more diverse. But that power structure now has to actually fight for relevance and fight to. So it seems like the racists are going crazy and the racists are exerting more power, and it's like it's the opposite. And so I kind of feel like in situations like that, unfortunately, shit's going to get a little bit worse before it starts to get better. Because and again, like, going back to, like, looking at, like, the area in North Philly around Temple, the idea at one point was, well, we'll just kick all of those people out. We'll just build more stuff for students. We'll build more stuff for the school. We'll make everything pretty. We'll make developers rich, and then everything will be fine.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't happen there. That didn't happen in Northern Liberties. It didn't happen in West Philly with UPenn. It's not going to happen in Kensington. And I think unfortunately, we have to go through all of that bullshit, and that bullshit has to crumble before people are like, okay, all that bullshit that you told us was going to work didn't work. And all of this other things that all of these other people have been telling us, you know, are what's going to get us there. I find myself thinking when you ask, what's it going to take for the people in power to get it? I remember during the Democratic primary, you and I were in two very different camps. And I, when we started this, I was like, wouldn't it be great if like opposing political parties were like your way of thought and my way of like if that was that, because that would be great. Because at the end of the day, while we might not see eye to eye on everything, there's a whole lot that we see eye to eye on that would be beneficial overall. Like it would be great if that were the political battle that happened. I would any day, and I'll say this blatantly, I would love to be seeing what a Rebecca Reinhardt or Helen administration would be doing to the city over what we have.
Yes.
But what we have, going back to how Philly politics work, when you have all of these other groups that can't get along with each other and can't understand and can't come to a general consensus in Philly, whoever can codify the black vote is going to overcome all of those other little schisms.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we are where we are. And I say we like I still live in Philly because I'm always going to be a Philadelphian, even though I live over here. But so until, and so it might take that kind of failure. And one of the things that, and this is going to sound really shitty, one of the things that made me happy about the ineffectiveness of the Kinney administration is it really showed, no, the general Philadelphia, Bob Brady, Jim Kenney mindset way of doing things is fucked, doesn't work, doesn't count, doesn't matter, is irrelevant. And so I kind of feel like, okay, we've seen that, we understand that. And it got to the point where even he was like, I don't want to do this shit no more. I kind of feel like Parker could very well be the death knell of the Philadelphia black family politician machine, because all of the stuff that she's talking about and a lot of the things that she got elected on, I
They're not going to work.
are not going to work. And so,
The city's going to be really shitty for the next 10, 15 years, and you're going to get a lot of Republicans celebrating from the burbs that say they'll never come to the city because it's a shithole, celebrating because suddenly the city is actually a shithole.
right. But hopefully coming out of that will be people who can go, you know what? For better or for worse, I love it here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to fix this shit rather than, you know, disappear. And again, I don't live in Jersey. It's weird. It's weird being a Philadelphian who lives in Jersey. And I am probably going to stay here. And it's not because I don't love Philly, because I absolutely love Philly with all my heart. I circumstances wound up in, well, here I am. Anyway, but I think people who are invested in Philly and who stay invested in Philly are going to stick around despite the shithole that's going to happen. I think, everything from SEPTA to what policing is going to become to whatever winds up happening with this arena. I think a lot of that shit's going to go south. And then the people who really care and who are still here are going to be like, all right, let's actually deal with this shit. And that's kind of how I feel in general. Like I said, what it might take for comfortable, well-off suburban Democrats to get it is losing again. And I don't want that to be the case. It's like, would a Biden administration be better than a Trump administration? No question. Absolutely. No doubt. Would it be good? No.
No.
It's only better than a Trump administration.
I've said it before. We're running the two biggest losers. Literally, like the only person that Trump could lose to, or that could lose the Republican vote is Trump, and the only person that could lose the Democratic vote is Biden. I don't quite
So
understand
let's
it.
do it again.
Yeah, so let's do it again. All right. We've
Right,
seen this
right.
4 years ago, I think, and then 4 years before that, I'm pretty sure we saw that kind of same thing. I mean, not that Hillary Clinton at least could have won, should have won the women's vote in its entirety, and I don't quite understand the. I mean, I do, but I also don't.
I was gonna say, in the country, white women are more invested in white supremacy than they are in equality.
Yeah,
Period.
yeah.
I mean, the numbers bear that
I mean,
out.
it's
Like, it's
shown that time and time and time and time
right.
again.
It's a
I mean, this
shitty
is.
thing to say, but the numbers bear it out.
But what was it back in the Dukakis era? There was a campaign that the female candidate lost so hard, and she was a good candidate. I don't remember all the details anymore, but yeah, it happens over and over again. It's like women are more critical of women. And this is, in psychological study, women are more critical of women than they are of men, which is fascinating. But yeah, all right, I'm gonna wrap up. You do you have any last thoughts? Anything that you want to say to the audience before we get going?
No. I love being here all the time. Thanks for having me back. Um,
Awesome.
let's do this. Let's do this again sometime. I love the fact that we are all over the map.
Yeah, no,
Like that's like 95 different things.
yeah, but it all ties together. I mean, it all has something to do with something, and each other really. I really like that's what I hope people get out of these conversations is really like how things are tied together and how important it is to like really think about and look at what's going on around you. Not maybe don't obsess over it, but but
That's our job.
yeah,
We'll do that for them.
we'll do that. We'll bring you the highlights.
Right, right.
As artists, as commentators, as news people, we try and bring you the things that are important. But yeah, at least try and be aware. Is Elon Musk tweeting 420 today because April 20th is coming around, or because he wants to get high, or because he thinks Hitler is a pretty cool guy and he should celebrate his birthday?
And the answer is yes.
All three. All right. Thank you so much for joining me, Rick, and thank you to the audience who stuck around for the part two here. They'll both be available online as soon for instant replay as soon as I end this broadcast. And we should have scheduled by now a good guest for next week. We don't have our next week's schedule set, but we will be live 10 a.m. next Wednesday. We'll let people know who the guest is and what's going on. Probably on Tuesday night again. Being a news and information show, I try and wait until the last minute to give people what we're going to talk about. But hopefully, we'll have a great conversation then again next week, and hopefully we'll have as great a guest as Rick. Maybe we'll just have Rick back on.
Maybe.
All right.
I don't know what I'm doing next. No, next week I'm in tech.
All
So have to be
right.
a couple weeks. But yeah. So thank you again.
Thank
and
you.
have a good one.
All right. And have
Bye
a
now.
great rest of your week, everybody.